Okay, so this right now is me finally uploading my first proper video to my YouTube channel. I say finally because it's a video that's taken me about a year to produce, which might lead you to expect that after this spoken introduction, we're going to transition into some sort of cinematic masterpiece directorial debut that I've poured my heart and soul into. Well, we're not, because I haven't. In fact, this entire video is going to be nothing more than me sat on my ass, flapping my gums in front of the camera for 10 or 15 minutes or however long it's going to take. When I say this video has taken me a year to produce, it's only going to be about 2 hours of that will actually be dedicated to filming, editing and uploading to YouTube. The other 364 days and 22 hours has been dedicated to prep work, or so I've been trying to convince myself. You see, it was my 2018 New Year's resolution to start making video content. Even like made a big announcement on the podcast, like, you know, get ready folks, taking this little project to the next level, what have you. And as long as it stayed 2018, there was always time for me to stay true to my word. But then January 2019 rolls around, 365 days and not one video to show for it, which is, it sort of forced me to actually take a step back and try to figure out what the hell I've been playing at, basically. Anyway, after a little contemplation, I've come to realise that what I thought was diligent preparation has really just been debilitating perfectionism in disguise. The reason it's taken me so long to recognise that distinction is because perfectionism tends to be associated with either like the process or the completion of a task, but not usually the commencement of one. So, for instance, say you're writing a novel. Perfectionism there might manifest as trying to make your first draft not your Magna Carta, your magnum opus, trying to make your first draft your magnum opus, like trying to bang out this perfect polished masterpiece on the first run. And so then you get caught up in the process of editing on the fly, always correcting yourself and never actually making it to the end. On the flip side of that, you know, maybe you do manage to bang out a first draft and a second and a third, and then, you know, a few months later you've got this finished novel that you're 98% happy with. But then you get caught up in the never-ending task of trying to sort of tweak and improve it. You know, that final 2%, trying to satisfy that final 2%, so that, you know, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years later, you still can't bring yourself to actually ship it off to your publisher because you're still not happy with it. But what I seem to have got caught up in is a kind of like a preemptive perfectionism, where I've been so concerned with being sort of immaculately prepared that I could never actually bring myself to get started in the first place. Which, like, coming back to the writing analogy, might sound more like writer's block than perfectionism. But it wasn't, because the whole thing with writer's block is you're blank. You don't know what you want to do, what to say, where to go with it. But it wasn't that for me. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't bring myself to get started. It wasn't procrastination either, because when you're procrastinating, you know full well you're piss farting about. Like, how often is it when you're procrastinating, do you not know that you're doing it or that it feels right? That never happens. And that's precisely why I couldn't see it for what it was, which was perfectionism, because it did feel right. This past year, I honestly felt like I was just trying to be professional and conscientious and demanding like a high standard from myself. And it's like, what's wrong with that? Anyway, now I've realised what I was doing and sort of spent some time having a little rinky-dink about it. I've managed to identify the two main limiting beliefs that sort of had me caught up in this preparatory limbo. So I thought, you know, what better topic to kickstart this new series of videos with than sort of sharing what those limiting beliefs were that stopped me getting started, and then how I've sort of managed to push past them, and well, hence me sitting here now, finally. Which I know on the face of it might sound a bit more like a productivity issue than anything to do with mental health, which is obviously what this channel's all about. But I think laying aside the fact that like productivity hacks can help us feel a little less stressed about our miserable existences in the first place, as I was letting this little insight swirl around, I realised that I've actually fallen into these same two traps like a million times before, and in loads of different contexts, but specifically in the context of mental health when it came to things like self-administered CBT, exercise and meditation. So I reckon these might ring true for some of you Muppets as well now. So let's crack on. Okay, so limiting belief number 1. I don't know enough. So this little fucker stems from the distorted belief that in order to embark on your chosen endeavour, that you first need to know absolutely everything there is to know about the subject surrounding it. So for me, the problem has been about stressing about how to shoot the perfect YouTube video. For you, it might be feeling like maybe like you don't know enough about weight training and building muscle before you start going to the gym. Or if you're trying to lose weight or whatever, maybe you can't bring yourself to throw all your chocolate and ice cream in the bin because you need to learn all about the paleo diet and the Atkins diet and the fucking purposefully cultivating a tapeworm diet to see which one's going to be like the right fit for you. You need to compare them and know everything about them. If you're hoping to, say, conquer depression or anxiety, maybe you feel like you need to properly understand like the biology and the neurochemistry of it before you decide on like the perfect approach. Or maybe you feel like you haven't read enough books about CBT, like you don't know enough techniques. You need to know all the techniques before you get started. And that's kind of what I did here. So, after like spending a couple of weeks learning like the basics of video production, things like, like setting up a camera, how to get fairly decent sound and lighting. By all accounts then, I knew everything I needed to know to get started. But rather than just jump straight into shooting my first video, I couldn't help but worry that like maybe I was missing something, and I'm thinking to myself, if I'm gonna do this, I want to do it properly and not just half-ass it. So instead of just like cracking on and learning on the fly, I felt the need to just keep learning. So, I decided to hold off a while longer and spend another couple of months researching some of the more like advanced aspects of video editing, things like 3-point lighting, which I haven't got, jump cuts, which I might do, B-roll, that ain't happening, and colour grading, that will be happening because I'm pale as shit. Look like I used Tipex as fake tan, and I've got a ginger beard, so you can count on the colour grading. Now, I'm not saying with this, I'm not saying that we shouldn't strive for mastery, because of course we should, and in the long run, like these are all perfectly legitimate knowledge sets to acquire. But there's two huge problems with, let's call it theory hoarding. Firstly, knowledge is only going to get you so far. You could read all the books in the world about, say, painting or playing tennis, but if you actually want to be a painter or a tennis player, eventually at some point you're going to have to just get out there and pick up a paintbrush or a tennis racket and actually start painting or, returning serves or whatever in order to actually understand and apply the things you've learned. Secondly, even worse, if you don't actually apply what you've learned, you're just going to forget it and waste all that time. It's, it's a well-known principle of brain plasticity that if you don't use it, you lose it. Like, people of my generation, you remember when you was like a teenager and you sort of tinkered about with a guitar for a couple of years and got pretty good at it. But now, like at the grand old age of 35, oh shit, I'm 36 now, grand old age of 36, you haven't practiced for 20 years and you're fucking rubbish again. That's because, back when you was practicing the guitar, your brain wired a bunch of neurons together dedicated to that particular task. But then, you got bored, stopped practicing, so your brain reallocated those neurons to help you with tasks that you do when you're 35, like, I don't know, doing the school run and growing a fucking pot belly. Now, I've watched a ridiculous amount of content about video production over the past year, but because I haven't actually been practicing what I've been learning, what I've actually retained beyond the basics, I'd probably write on the back of a matchbox in crayon. Anyway, I've come to realise that the truth is, it doesn't matter how many books you read or videos you watch or courses you take, there's always going to be more to learn. There's always going to be another layer of detail to explore, a new theory, a different approach, another technique. Like even world-class professionals in any occupation, they'll tell you that, you know, they're always learning. Nobody's omniscient. In fact, the only person who is omniscient is God, supposedly, and even he doesn't know everything. See that? I don't know if that's going to focus on it. The Bible, right? So this is the bit where Eve goes and fucks everything up by chomping on the apple. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? Brilliant, right? Think about that. If the all-knowing, all-powerful God can't find his two little pet monkeys in a game of hide and seek in his own back garden, right? Especially when they're stood behind a tree, the shittest hiding place ever, with the tits and bollocks hanging out. If he can't figure out that mystery, right, maybe I should go a little easier on myself, right, when it comes to making a video for YouTube that no one's even going to see with me 1,000 subscribers. So, yeah, there's gaps in everyone's knowledge. The thing with that is that's an appeal to emotion, isn't it? Like, go easy on yourself. Thinking about it like a little more pragmatically, I think what you have to try and do instead is when you feel like I don't know enough about X, you need to clarify your definition of what it means to know enough. So the dictionary definition of enough is adequate for the want or need or sufficient for the purpose. So then what you need to do is ask yourself, what would be sufficient for the purpose of just getting started? For instance, so learning how to perform lunges, press-ups and planks, what won't give you a lickable six-pack or anything. A lickable six-pack. I wouldn't mind, right? But when I said that, I actually pictured like a man's rippling torso, and obviously the lickable bit, that's going to take some mild contemplation to deal with later. Anyway, so lunges, sit-ups, press-ups or what have you, they're not going to get you a PhD in sports science, but it is enough to help you get started just burning some calories and building a bit of muscle. CBT, like learning the 10 cognitive distortions, don't make you a clinical psychologist, but you know, it's enough to sort of go to work on challenging destructive thought patterns that might lead to feelings of depression and anxiety. So I don't know enough about, I probably just can't remember enough about video production to be able to like produce like cinematic short films with like snappy montages and dazzling cinematography. But I do know enough to just record myself talking into a camera and then upload that video to YouTube and make it freely available to my tiny pool of subscribers. So that for me is sufficient for the purpose of getting started. So for the time being at least, that's all that matters. That's all I need to know. And you know, the rest I can learn as I progress. Okay, so the second limiting belief I've been struggling with is I don't have the right equipment, or just I need better stuff. So despite the fact that there seems to be plenty of examples out there of people creating successful YouTube channels just like shooting on an iPhone, I somehow managed to convince myself that I needed like a more professional setup. So I've got this dodgy ring light with diffuser zip tied to it, which sort of looks like, you know, when you use it at like a public toilet and you don't want to actually sit on the seat, you don't want any skin contact because you don't know who's been there, what's happened in there, who's died in there. So you line the toilet seat with bog roll to act like a toilet seat condom to protect yourself. That's what that looks like, and it buzzes all the time. I'm sure it's going to cause an house fire. So I've got this modern art installation, a homage to toilet seats, lighting me up. The camera is on this shitty, wonky mic stand with a dodgy leg that I can never get to stand up straight. And then, I've got this cheap lapel mic from China off eBay, cost about £2. And then I'm shooting on this little Canon point and shoot, which is actually a decent little camera, to be fair, but it's not a DSLR. Do you know what I mean? And when you look at people like Casey Neistat and Peter McKinnon, those guys use like DSLRs with professional lenses and stuff. So I figured, this little compact piece of shit wasn't fit for purpose. And, what I really needed was something like a Panasonic GH5 or a Canon 6D or, whatever all the big YouTubers are shooting on at the moment. But, since I can't afford one, I've just sort of been waiting for the day when I can, and doing more window shopping than a fucking greenhouse manufacturer, just constantly scrolling, watching reviews of cameras and stuff. Like, I need that. Anyway, so again, how might this apply to other things? So say you're struggling to get started with diet and exercise. That might be because you've convinced yourself that you need some like fancy home gym equipment, or maybe you need to do that $500 juice cleanse that you've seen Super Tits advertising on Instagram to get your diet off to a good start. Or if you want to start meditating, maybe you feel like you need to have, find the right kind of environment to do it properly. You couldn't possibly just sit on the end of your bed and do it. You've got to empty out the spare room and redecorate it and get it kitted out with a Buddha statue and a fucking gong and a meditation cushion. Now, there may very well be extra benefits to be gleaned from having all this like premium setup. But I think when you're starting from scratch and you don't even know if you're gonna stick to this shit, I've come to realise that sort of lusting after all this top of the range paraphernalia, it's not just unnecessary, you're actually being a bit of a pompous twat. Because firstly, there's a big difference between wanting and needing. Like, sure, that mega expensive home gym setup would be awesome or whatever, and that 10-day meditation school in Hawaii sounds amazing. But you don't need those things, especially when you're a beginner, Like when you're just starting out, all you need is the bare minimum required to sort of get you off the starting blocks and into the race. And I guess one of the reasons why we sort of lust after all like this fancy equipment is believing that there's something magical about this stuff that's going to like supercharge your progress, or that maybe that it'll do the work for you. But I think in most cases that's probably an illusion. Like, I'm sure like the Canon 6D is capable of producing amazing video quality, but if my speaking skills aren't up to scratch and my topics are boring, then 4K video and nice bokeh it isn't going to compensate for that. If anything, it's just going to sort of magnify my shortcomings as a public speaker. A bit like taking a boy racer who enjoys pulling wheel spins in his shitty little Vauxhall Corsa on Asda car park and then plonking his little Lynx Africa smelling ass into a Formula One car and being like, off you pop. Little tosser wouldn't even be able to figure out how to adjust the wing mirror, never mind pull off a decent lap time. Likewise, buying fancy gym equipment. It's like, it might be professional, but you're not professional, So it doesn't matter whether your gym setup is like a brand new £10,000 sleek, shiny aluminum architectural masterpiece, or like a rusty old pile of shit that you bought for £20 off Craigslist. A kilogram is a kilogram is a kilogram. And your skinny ass ain't bench pressing a cock and end per kilogram any easier than it is 10 pence a kilogram. Oh, a cock and end is a tenner, by the way, £10. Now, again, don't get me wrong, this isn't just sort of a recommendation towards frugality. Even if you're fortunate enough to be in a position where money is like no object for you, I think it's worth considering the idea that just because you can afford something doesn't mean you actually deserve to own it. So, like at this point in time, for me to attempt to wield a super advanced camera would be completely pointless. My current understanding of video production and the scope of my filmmaking skills probably couldn't stretch the capabilities of a smartphone camera. So it's like, who the hell am I to be buying a top of the range DSLR anyway? It's like buying yourself a £700 Damascus chef knife when all you know how to cook is fucking beans on toast. So instead, I've decided to try and think of a Canon 6D as kind of like a trophy to be earned. So when I finally find my skill set is sort of stretching the limitations of this little point and shoot, then and only then should I begin to consider an upgrade. And then by that point, I can be proud of myself because I've earned the right to do so. But for now though, I just need to be honest with myself and accept that with my limited knowledge and this basic talking head video concept, I don't really need anything more advanced. And even if I had it, it still wouldn't compensate for the inadequacies that are inherent in being a beginner in the first place. Inadequacies that aren't going to get better by reading more books or buying fancy equipment, but by just practicing and mastering my craft. So, for me right now, this means just making the best of a mediocre camera and a toilet seat. For you, with like exercise or whatever, it might mean just doing push-ups and lunges in your front room, or with like with meditation, it might mean just sitting and doing it at your dinner table. And whether you start now with a little bit of knowledge and Bargate basement tat, or in 2 years' time with all the theory in the world and gold-plated professional equipment, in both cases you're starting from scratch anyway. So why not just start now and bag some experience in the meantime? The mediocre resources you put to use are better than the perfect resources that you don't even possess. But whatever it is you want to do, stop waiting to make the perfect start. You don't need to start as you mean to end up. You don't even need to start as you mean to go on. You just need to fucking start. So, here I am starting. Average camera, toilet seat. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Not really, but whatever. I've done it now. I'm now officially a YouTuber as well as a podcaster. There's an achievement if ever there was one for a 35-year-old. Anyway, so that's my advice. Just my opinion. Take it with a pinch of salt or gobble it up like an hungry hippo. It's up to you. I'm not bothered. Anyway, since we're doing this YouTube malarkey, I suppose all the usual bollocks applies. So I'm not going to say smash that like button, but like the video if you liked it. Don't if you didn't. Subscribe if you want, and turn your notifications on if you can be asked. I'll be honest, I wouldn't. 3 clicks, it's too much piss farting about. And I've got to be honest, I don't remember a single time when I've clicked the subscribe button because the twat in the window told me to. So, whatever. Do what you want. You're going to anyway. See you later.